Now, this probably was the coronavirus, but you promised to write me an article some weeks ago.
It's coming.
I've got half of it here. So we're going to talk about that half of it.
The good half.
Right.
It hasn't been written yet.
Right, okay. And just for everyone at home, this article is really to talk about being able to pick winners and losers in the space, because in all commodities there are companies which are going to make it and other companies perhaps will struggle a bit, and we don't want to waste anyone's time talking about companies which perhaps are going to struggle for whatever reason. So we're going to talk about some of those headlines
for nickel. Yeah,
for nickel. Okay, they kind of apply to all commodities in a way, some of them.
Well, nickel is unique though, and really interesting, and I'll tell you why. Because nickel, unlike gold, you could get a gold CEO in here who would potentially have a project that would need under $100 million of capex for production. That's possible.
Right.
Nickel is very, very capital intensive. In fact, I would argue that nickel is possibly the biggest destroyer of value over 20 years with the Hpal projects. Projects like Goro ended up costing $8 billion, meant to be a couple, and Batavi, 5, Ravensor.
Okay, here's one. I got one. So we've had a bit of a debate online, because we got a quote from obviously someone Mark Selby, saying you can't build a Hpal project for under $1 billion. We've got a AIM-listed company management team CEO saying that's not true. We've got some new Chinese technology coming through, and Hpal will be able to be delivered for much less than that. Are you a buyer of that? What is this new technology?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. I think you're talking about two separate things. If you're talking about a brand new standalone project, I'm unaware of a single instance where someone's done that for $100 billion.
Today.
When they're not relying on infrastructure, when it's a new project sitting in the middle of the jungle, wherever it is, I think that's not happening anytime soon.
Right.
However, if you're talking about specifically about some of the stuff the Chinese are doing with Hpal in Indonesia, that's totally different, because what they're doing is they're tacking on $1 billion onto $7 billion of infrastructure. So this is a kind of
so there's an infrastructure component with the plant.
Exactly.
Plant can you build a plant on top of a resource for $1 billion?
Okay. Can you build a plant on top of an existing producing mine in Indonesia where the Chinese have already spent $7 billion?
You're going to say yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So can you go from $7 billion to $8 billion? Yes.
Greenfield site?
I would be hard pressed to think of a single example in the world where you could do that.
Okay.
I just don't. And by the way, this is important about investing. So, I think when you're looking at nickel names, I think you have to ask yourself, what is really fundamentally the process? Not are we sugarcoating it? Is it Hpal? And if it's Hpal, if the answer is this is an Hpal project, I think you have to think it's going to be in the billions of dollars.
Right.
Right. And so, if you're thinking about a speculative play, is this a big ore body? Will it go up when nickel moves? The answer might be yes. But if you're thinking, will this be a mine? I think the answer is going to be most likely not.
So how would a company get a feasibility study done by an independent contractor to tell you it's going to cost less than that for a Hpal project?
Well, I can't speak to any specific situation, but I think just generally, look at Nemaska. Okay.
Yeah.
They're in receivership now.
Yeah.
And they had, I think, no less than 4 of the top, contracting firms working on that project, or consultants, I shouldn't say contracting firms. They missed it by $500 million. So I think it happens. I think is the answer. It happens, and I can't speak to why one person will miss it or another person will miss it. But Hpal, one of the things to remember about Hpal is, the tailings.
Yeah.
Really should be in an environment, especially if it's tailings sitting behind a tailings dam, need to be in an environment where you evaporate more water than rains in a year. And so if you're in a place or a situation where you have torrential downpours and you're not going to evaporate, you just have a real problem with tailings.
Right.
And in a post-Vale world, I think globally regulators are thinking about tailings. So to step back from all that and talk about just investing in nickel, I think you need to think about, is this a sulfide or is this a laterite?
Right.
Because at least, in Dumont is an example in Canada, potentially in Turnagain someday. Those projects, the processing is very simple and straightforward. Everyone knows how to do that. You can come up with a number that's real. It might be $1.5 billion for Dumont. I don't know what that number is going to be, but that's the number. Whereas if you go into some of the Australian Hpal processes, or elsewhere in the world, frankly, you don't know how long is a piece of string. And so Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't necessarily own those names because, when the nickel tape happens, any big resource will go up because it's just the case that will be true. And so you can own a basket, but specifically you need to trade those names because if you look through the cycle, it's hard to see after Mbatavi, after Ravensthorpe, after Goro, it's hard to see that anyone is going to build a greenfield Hpal project.
Right.
Different than brownfield expansion,
Yeah.
tagging onto an existing project, but a greenfield project is like pretty unlikely in my view.